police officer walks up to your window and says, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" You're nervous, your heart is racing, cars are flying past you at 70 miles an hour, and without thinking, you say, "Honestly, officer, I was probably speeding." That one sentence may have just handed the officer evidence. Now, imagine this. The officer asks, "You don't mind if I take a quick look inside the car, right?" You laugh nervously and say, "I guess that's fine." Seconds later, the entire traffic stop changes. What started as a simple warning can suddenly become a vehicle search, a roadside interrogation, or even criminal charges. So, what should you actually say during a police traffic stop? Can you refuse questions? Can you stay silent? And what are the 5 phrases you should never say if you want to protect your rights? Most people don't know their rights until it's too late. If you want to stay one step ahead and never get caught off guard, hit subscribe now. And if this opened your eyes, share it with someone and tell me your thoughts in the comments. Because most people unknowingly give officers everything they need to build a case in the first 30 seconds. Here's what you need to know. The biggest mistake people make during traffic stops is thinking they can talk their way out of trouble. Sometimes people panic and over-explain. Sometimes they try to sound cooperative. Sometimes they think honesty alone will protect them. But traffic stops are legal investigations. Officers are trained to observe behavior, collect statements, and document inconsistencies. And the smallest statement can later appear in a police report, in court, or during questioning. That does not mean you should be rude. It does not mean you should refuse lawful commands. And it definitely does not mean escalating the situation on the roadside. Your goal is simple. Stay calm, comply with lawful instructions, do not volunteer information, do not consent unnecessarily, and know exactly how to communicate clearly and respectfully. By the end of this video, you'll know the 5 things you should never say during a traffic stop, what officers are usually trying to establish, and the exact phrases many legal experts recommend instead. Let's start with the first one. Never say, "I know I was speeding." This is one of the most common mistakes during traffic stops. Officer says, "Do you know why I stopped you today?" Driver says, "Yeah, I was probably going a little fast." That statement may sound harmless, but legally you may have just admitted to the violation. A lot of people think the officer is simply making conversation, but that question is often designed to get an admission. Instead, stay calm and neutral. You can say, "Officer, I'm not sure," or "Can you tell me why you stopped me?" Why does this matter? Because you're not required to investigate yourself for the officer, and if the officer believed you violated traffic laws, they can explain the reason for the stop themselves. You do not need to fill in the blanks. Now, here's a second thing you should never say. Never say, "You can search the car." This is where many people accidentally waive important protections. Officer says, "You don't mind if I take a quick look inside, do you?" A nervous driver says, I guess that's okay." That single sentence may be interpreted as consent to search, and once consent is given, it can become much harder later to challenge that search. Now, to be clear, officers may sometimes search a vehicle without consent depending on the circumstances, the state, probable cause, visible evidence, arrests, or other legal exceptions. But many searches begin with simple permission. If you do not want to consent, stay respectful and clear. Say this, "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." That phrase matters because it does 2 things at once. It shows you are not physically resisting, but it also clearly states you are not voluntarily giving permission. That distinction can become extremely important later. And notice something important here. You are not arguing. You are not yelling constitutional phrases through the window. You are simply stating your position calmly. That matters. Now, let's talk about the third mistake. Never say, "I only had a couple drinks." This one destroys people in DUI investigations. Officer says, "Have you had anything to drink tonight?" Driver says, "Just 1 beer," or "Only 2 drinks a few hours ago." The problem is that people think small admissions sound innocent, but officers are often documenting signs of impairment from the very beginning: speech patterns, eye movements, odors, confusion, and statements. Even a small admission can later support probable cause. Now, laws surrounding DUI stops vary heavily state by state and situation. Some states also require you to identify yourself or comply with certain testing rules under implied consent laws. But one thing many defense attorneys consistently warn against is volunteering extra information. Instead of explaining or minimizing, many legal experts recommend politely exercising your right to remain silent. You can say, "I choose to remain silent," or "I would like to speak to a lawyer." Why is this powerful? Because silence cannot easily be twisted into conflicting statements later. But there's an important warning here. Remaining silent does not mean refusing lawful orders. You still may need to provide identification, registration, or comply with lawful commands depending on your state's laws. Know the difference between compliance and conversation. Now, the fourth thing you should never say during a traffic stop is this. Never say, "Go ahead, officer, I've got nothing to hide." People say this constantly. And usually they say this because they feel nervous refusing. But rights are not only for guilty people. The Fourth Amendment exists precisely because citizens are allowed to maintain privacy without proving innocence first. And here's the trap. Sometimes people genuinely forget what is inside their vehicle. Prescription bottles, someone else's backpack, old items left in the trunk. Legal issues are often created by accidental discoveries people never expected officers to find. So instead of trying to sound cooperative by waiving your rights, stay respectful and calm. Use this phrase, "I am not resisting, but I do not consent to searches." That wording matters because it reduces the chance officers interpret your behavior as physical interference. You are verbally preserving your rights while remaining calm, and that's exactly what you want during roadside encounters. Now, here's the fifth thing you should never say. Never say, "I'm not answering anything," while acting aggressive. Tone matters more than people realize. A traffic stop is not the place to win an argument. It is not the courtroom, and roadside escalation can quickly make things worse. Some people watch videos online and think they need to argue every legal point with the officer. That is usually a mistake. Fast movements, shouting, interrupting, reaching unexpectedly, or refusing basic lawful instructions can increase tension instantly. Instead, stay calm and controlled. If you want to know whether you are being held or free to leave, ask clearly. Am I free to leave or am I being detained? That question matters because it forces legal clarity. If you're free to leave, the stop may end. If you're being detained, the officer is indicating the interaction is continuing under legal authority. And if questioning continues beyond basic identification, you can calmly say, "I exercise my right to remain silent." Short, clear, respectful. No debate needed. And here's another major warning. Do not make sudden movements during traffic stops. If you need to reach for documents, communicate first. Say, "My registration is in the glove compartment. Is it okay if I reach for it?" Simple communication can prevent misunderstandings. Remember, officers don't know who they're approaching during a stop. Sudden reaching or aggressive behavior can rapidly increase tension. Another mistake people make is talking too much after the officer already made a decision. Sometimes drivers keep explaining, they keep apologizing, they keep adding details, and the more they speak, the more information gets documented. Silence often protects people more effectively than improvisation. Now, to be clear, laws vary depending on the state, the reason for the stop, whether there is probable cause, whether arrests occur, and many other facts. This video is educational information, not personal legal advice. But across many jurisdictions, the safest general framework during police encounters stays remarkably consistent. Stay calm, keep your hands visible, comply with lawful commands, do not argue roadside, do not volunteer information, do not consent unnecessarily, and know exactly how to communicate clearly and respectfully. Because the biggest danger during traffic stops is not always what officers find. Sometimes it's what drivers say. And in the next video, we're breaking down the exact police phrases officers use to get drivers to unknowingly waive their rights during casual conversation after the stop should already be over.